as was introed, I'm going to talk about mentoring and coaching from my side of things, from the Formula One track, from a sports point of view, and particularly their kind of holistic approach for the four Dementia Researchers that I was working with predominantly last year, Claire being one of them. My background, I'm a senior performance coach, and my background's in strength and conditioning. So predominantly my specialty is as a physical trainer, and preparing Romain Grosjean for driving in Formula One was my job for the best part of 4 to 5 years, from 2016 onwards. So I had the privilege of working with him and traveling with him. And he, yes, top left, suffered this kind of major accident you might have seen in the press and the news if you follow Formula One or just on the news, the end of last year, and highlights the dangers of this sport and the stress that this sport entails. But he's back competing now in IndyCar and doing really well over in America. He's just recently ended up on the podium for the second or third time this season. So he's bounced back really well. So what has Formula One got to do with you guys is a classic question. And to highlight that, yes, there's the physical nature of Formula One, the G-force that is influenced on the body, on the driver. But ultimately, it's actually the cognitive demands and the cognitive skills of the driver that makes a difference between winning and losing in Formula One. They have to make these split-second decisions. They have to constantly adapt, have high-level learning. They have to have a very good level of memory, as you can see from all the different switches and options that they have on the steering wheel. And they have to multitask those switches depending on, the track conditions, various conditions within the race. And they have to multitask that with what's going on within their ear and listening to their engineers as well. So they need a very high level of focus, and they need to avoid distractions and try and avoid errors. So it is very much using their mind as their tool. And a lot of sport requires physical attributes. Yes, this does, but actually the mind is as important, if not more important, in this particular sport. And unlike Olympic athletes, these Formula One drivers have to maintain this throughout the whole year. So similar to you guys, you're using your mind, you're using a lot of cognitive skills when you work as scientists, and you have to do this for the whole year. So they have a 10 to 11 month season. They travel a lot as well. So they race in different continents. So there's jet lag. A little bit less travel last year, along with everyone else. And they have intense periods where they have to perform, much like you guys will, whether it's race or tests or even training. And therefore kind of periods of recovery and how we optimize their health and well-being for their performance is vitally important. So I'm a coach, so I'm very practical driven, and I want to get you involved in something that's a bit more interactive. So I'm going to give you this little test, this little memory recall test. I'm going to show you 6 shapes and colors on the screen. I'm going to give you about half a second, which is a long time in the Formula One world. And I want you to see if you can recall as many of those shapes, and if you can get colors as well as possible. By all means, put it on the chat, or if you're on screen, Penny, I can see you, so you can hold up how many fingers you've seen with the shapes. But I want you to, before you go into that situation, I want you to imagine you're in the race car. I want you to imagine that this is a racetrack where you've made mistakes in the past, and you've potentially had crashes in practice sessions building up to this. Your management putting you under a lot of pressure to perform. Your team and your team manager as well are telling you that you need to start getting points or getting on the podium, or otherwise you won't have a job next year. So take that sort of mental overload, that mental stimulus and stress and emotions, and put it into this task now for half a second. Okay, 3, 2, 1, go. How many did you get, Penny? 4. It's pretty good. I won't ask anyone to recall them, but I will show you the answers just to see out of. So if you got some of the shapes, brilliant. Maybe you got like the circle, the square, the triangle. Maybe other ones stood out for you, and maybe some of the colours stood out for you as well. Typically for Formula One drivers, it's quite normal for people to be able to absorb about 3 bits of information at once. And it can be trained that you can take on more than that, 4 or 5. And there's various companies that work in kind of vision training and memory training to do that we've worked with in the past. But my challenge for you, and my kind of the real important factor of doing that for me is how did you feel while you were doing that? I put you into that situation where I was trying to generate an emotional response, generate a bit more stress. How did you feel when you were trying to do that task and you had that going on in the background? Were you still able to focus? Did you feel your heart rate going up a little bit? Did you feel a little bit nervous? Sometimes the same can be said for public speaking tasks, like people have a reaction to it. So that's the first step, being aware of it. Now, what about under extreme stress? And I appreciate that potentially your day-to-day job isn't life and death, but actually what you guys are doing in the lab has big subsequent kind of reactions in terms of general population and helping with people's lives. So there's a lot of stress with what we do on a week-to-week basis. And if it's not life and death on the right, we're then just trying to optimize in a race car day to day when they're at the track is pretty stressful because it's quite close to getting it wrong and making mistakes. So there's a level of stress. How do you feel under that stress is the question I want you to kind of reflect on. Now, the reason why I'm doing this is because your work demands cognitive performance under stress. We all experience stress to perform tasks, whether that's on the racetrack or stress to attract various funding and get scientific experiments and things like that done. So how can we coach this? How can I translate what I'm doing in the Formula One world to the fellows that I was working with last year? We at Hintsa have this as our model. It's called the Circle of Better Life, and it's a holistic approach to performance. Now, on the surface, it looks quite simple. 6 areas around the outside, 1 in the middle called the core. But the balance, the challenge is really getting the balance right. And our ethos is kind of well-being first, and as a knock-on effect, we get success in our performance. So how aware are you of these different elements in different areas? And when we start with the program with the fellows, we go round this wheel, this circle of better life, and through surveys, through questionnaires, we start to build up scores. Now, this is just a generic set of results, but maybe think about where you sit on this. How would you mark yourself out of 5 on all of these different areas? How's your general health? How's your physical activity? Once you can build up that picture, then you can start to answer the second question of where you need to take action. And then think about under stress. What goes under stress when you're overloaded? Is it sleep? Is it physical activity? Sometimes we make poor nutritional decisions when we're under stress. So my job as a coach is to kind of explore this, is to understand this for every individual, and to try and optimize this the best we can. If we can get all of these in the kind of green zone, above 4 out of 5, then generally people are going to feel much better, and they're going to perform much better cognitively as well. So you're going to get a lot more out of yourself day to day, focused, doing your experiments, and also in your own personal life and in your own social life as well. You're not just going to be kind of burnt out doing your work and not able to actually do other areas of your life that are also very important. So to give you a bit of a concrete example of how this looked like, this is a bit of a timeline of how we worked with some of the fellows. I won't go through all of this, but it essentially included taking each of those areas of well-being individually and working on them for a month, setting some goals, and making sure that we were taking 1 or 2 steps within each sprint, we call it, so we could actually have make an impact. Otherwise, you try to do too much, and one, it's just going to overload you, and you end up not making progress at all. So once you go back to this one, if you pick your lowest score on this, say it's physical activity or say it's sleep, then you can start to go, right, I'm going to start with my sleep and recovery. That's the area that is suffering at the moment. That's the area that is not giving me enough energy to be physically active. And the next day I'm really tired, so I reach for the sugary drink or something in order to give me a bit more energy. So starting to understand the relationships between these different areas of well-being is part of the job. And we work through that on a kind of 7 to 8 month period. And hopefully the end of it, much more rounded, much better well-being in terms of analysing, your nutrition, your sleep and recovery, and really optimising those. Again, this is how it looks like in a kind of concrete fashion. We have an app that we work with as well. We have face-to-face meetings that we've done remotely. And we use different tools like journaling, like self-assessments, like activity logging to work on those different areas of the well-being. And this is exactly what we've done with Formula One drivers. We have various initial meetings at the start, and we look at their whole life, not just are you physically and mentally strong enough and capable enough to drive a car, but how is your sleep and recovery? Because that plays a huge part. How is your nutrition? How is your biomechanics? Do you have bad posture, and when you're in the car, it's causing you pain and therefore causing you distraction? The same can be said if you're working in a lab or at a computer a lot. If you've got back pain, I guarantee that's causing you some form of feelings of poor well-being, and at the very least, just causing you to be distracted from your work. So small things like that can sometimes have quite a big impact in your performance. So a few things I want you to reflect on and kind of take away is that, do we really think about making sure that we are physically and mentally healthy and doing things, creating habits that are going to create health physically and mentally when we're 80 years old? So maybe several years ago, I would have disagreed with this, but I think now the more I've done my job, maybe the older people get as well, then they start to move down the column from 1 closer to 5 as they get closer to 80 possibly. But I think it's something that we should take seriously very early on, because the choices we make do make a big difference in terms of our well-being later on in life. And Margaret Thatcher is in her case here, unfortunately, a prime example is that she was renowned for not sleeping very much, 4 hours a night, 3 hours a night. Sleep is for wimps. This is what she would say. Now, we know this is not the case anymore, and we know, you guys know, the importance of sleeping in terms of clearing the toxins that build up within the brain. So she suffered from dementia later on in her life, and possibly it could have been linked to this lack of sleep. So think about that. Think about the big picture in terms of being healthy until you're later on in life, but also think about right now, how are you feeling? What is your body telling you? Athletes are very good at being selfish, and they get labeled as selfish, and it seems to be a negative connotation. But athletes are also the best population at getting the most out of themselves and protecting their own performance, because when they jump in the car, when they get on the racetrack, that's what's going to pay their bills is their body. But it's the same for all of us. And if we're having migraines, if we're having brain fog, if we're feeling tired regularly, there's something not going right there. Those little whispers that your body's telling you that something is out of balance, they should be listened to. This is a little tool I've used with some people before to listen to those whispers. Is as in poker, what's your stress tell? So do you know how you react under stress, and what's the earliest sign of that? And I'll use myself as an example that if I'm doing too much, I'm not sleeping particularly well, I'm putting myself under stress, whether it's rushing around, I will eventually get a migraine or a headache. And that's my way of my body basically stopping me. If it gets to that point, I have to go and lie down in a dark room, and I will lose 2 hours of that day to take some paracetamol or whatever it is. But if I can work back from that and go, actually, I was under stress before that. Maybe I was feeling a little bit anxious. Maybe I was feeling a bit irritable. Maybe I was, worrying about something I didn't need to worry about. And those are the things that I start to be aware of. And I go, you know what? If that's happening, I need a break. I need to protect myself. I need to look after myself. I need to go and take 20 minutes. Do it now and take 20 minutes, or forced to do it later and lose 2 hours is the way I see it. So the more you can take these things and take a screenshot or just think about it now, if you can work back from some of those big physical stress reactions and think, you know what, there's probably something more minor that is telling me to slow down and to do something about it, where maybe I'm not drinking enough, maybe I need to stay hydrated. That will save you in the long run. And in fact, not only might it save you during that day, but it might save you kind of 80 years' time. But that's all kind of subjective, and we're coming from a point of science as well at Hintsa, and the things we do are underpinned scientifically. We use a few tools here. We use the first beat, which assesses the heart rate variability to give you a stress score and to analyze if your sleep and daytime recovery is balancing out all the stress reactions. You can use things like the Aura Ring, and I wear one regularly, to see how your recovery is overnight, to see how efficient your sleep is. And that can give you really good guidance on that. And we use other things for nutrition and physical training tracking. I want to leave you with, I think this is the last thing, there might be one more, but I want to leave you with this, which is an activity I did with a few of the fellows, is think about that holistic circle of better life. Think about all those areas that you need to work on. And then think about the stress and how it impacts you. Now think about, if we could live the perfect day, what does that mean? And you're going to get a lot more out of your job, your life by doing that. Now we can put that into a checklist, and I would encourage you to do this. So put down the few elements of a great day that you perform at your best. So put some basics down. For me, it might be make sure I get 8 hours sleep, make sure I have a sense of enjoyment and challenge, at least 30 minutes of exercise a day. Those sort of things I know. And 4 times 1 hour focused work. If I do that each day, then I feel like I'm being successful. If I have 4 lots of 1 hour blocks where I'm coaching people or doing presenting, then I feel like I'm being efficient and productive. And then start to make a checklist to this. So how are we going to get those 4 times 1 hour focused sessions? Well, put your phone on flight mode, avoid those distractions. How are you going to get 30 minutes of exercise? You'll need your training clothes at work or those. So practical things, and make this into a day-to-day checklist, and then put this into an actual timetable where you're going to do those 4 times 1 hour sessions of work. If you know your schedule strictly, then that's great. But you can start to think about when you work at your optimum as well. Some people are morning people, some people are more afternoon and evening people. This happens as well at the racetrack, because we get a schedule of media commitments of when Roman needs to be performing for his practice sessions. So practice 1, practice 2, qualifying, everything else builds up to that. So when they eat, when they rest, when they do their warm up, builds up to peaking for that 1 or 2 hours, if it's the race or if it's the qualifying. It's called periodization in sport, but without structuring it, then what we did the days before could negatively impact him at the racetrack. And the same with you guys. If you've got some important work coming up, then being able to plan for that and schedule for that, and knowing yourself as well as possible what you need to perform optimally is the key. So just to recap, take this away. Where do you need to take action? Work on one thing today and take a couple of small steps. If you need any ideas, if you've got any questions about, I need to be more physically active, but I don't know what to do, I'm happy to answer some at the end. But just start with the one area where you probably neglect the most at work, under stress, or just currently in your day-to-day situation. And this is our founder, and he created our method, and he understood that success is a byproduct of well-being. If we are not healthy and we don't have a high level of well-being, then we're not going to perform at the racetrack. We're not going to perform in our jobs, in the laboratory or during business. We'll be distracted by our neglected areas of well-being. So over to you for questions. Thank you very much for listening to that. I will unshare.